Welcome to CEASEFIRE, where we seek to bridge the divide in American politics. I'm Greta Bronner, in for Dasha Burns. Joining me now on either side of the desk, two guests who have agreed to keep the conversation civil even when they disagree. Nebraska Republican Congressman Mike Flood and Missouri Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be with.
Let's start with housing legislation, something the two of you agree on. You both serve on the House Financial Services Committee. Chairman Flood, you are the chair of the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee. And Congressman Cleaver, you're the ranking member of the committee. You've been working on some major housing legislation to reduce housing costs and increase supply. Give us a brief overview, Congressman Flood.
Well, housing affordability has become a top issue in American politics today because the average homeowner, first-time homeowner, is now 40 years old. And there's a lot of folks in their 20s and 30s that don't have the opportunity to buy a home or can't afford it. And we have 5 million units more that are needed. So we have a supply issue that's driving demand. It's pushing prices up. We've seen massive inflation. And so Mr. Cleaver and I have been working on addressing that and making sure that the federal programs that make money available to Habitat for Humanity or a community or a housing organization are used wiser and more efficiently so that more people can take advantage of what the government's trying to do.
Congressman Cleaver, how did the two of you come together?
Actually, I think that the chairman, after getting elected, we have to get elected to these positions. It's not like a big election, however, but after he got the election, I'd sent him a note, and he responded. We unceremoniously had dinner with staff, and I went home and told my wife, I said, I think I have somebody with whom I can work. And it turns out that my instincts were good. And then we started on this program, trying to modernize this program, the home program, which is a block grant program, and try to create an opportunity for, eliminating a lot of the unnecessary requirements that actually will discourage people who want to make an investment, or let's say the Home Builders Association.
So, Congressman Flood, you broke bread. Is that the secret to
Well,
getting
I'm from
legislation?
Nebraska, so I had to get this Missouri guy over to my favorite restaurant, the Prime Rib, and we had 12-ounce prime ribs, and we enjoyed getting to know each other. I come from a state where I was the speaker of the nonpartisan unicameral, and to be successful there, you have to be able to build relationships with everybody to pass a bill. And so when I got the chance to be the chairman of this committee, I wanted to make sure I developed a good relationship with the ranking member, and he really cares about housing. I mean, he should tell you his stories. I mean, he comes from a background where he knows the value of housing, and it's not just a home. It is something much more personal to those families that live in an unhoused environment. And he should tell you that story, because when he told me about where he was in housing, I was like, he and I are going to work together just fine.
You seem like it touched you emotionally.
You gotta listen to him, and he's lived it.
Well, I have, and when I was elected to Congress, and I met with the Speaker at the time, Nancy Pelosi, and others, and they were asking me what committee do you want to serve on, and I said whatever committee is ultimately over housing, and I said financial services, and I said that's where I want to be. I don't want to be Speaker. I don't want to be majority leader, minority leader. I don't want to be anything. I want to be on the housing.
And why was that?
Well, I until I was 6 years old, I lived in a house in Waxahachie, Texas, still stands, in an alley off a street called Kaufman. So some of the viewers can probably get there if you're in Waxahachie in 2 or 3 minutes. But it was a shack, no electricity, no indoor plumbing. And I'm not sure we realized how poor we were. My 3 sisters and I, and my mother and father obviously did. But it put me in a situation where I eventually came to the conclusion, after we moved out of public housing, we eventually moved to public housing and then out. I realized then that I don't want anybody else to have to experience growing up like that.
Going back to that dinner that you shared with Congressman Flood, you went back, you told your wife, I think I have somebody I can work with. Did you feel surprised by that?
Yes, unfortunately, that those kinds of things are surprises in today's Washington. But I do think that I made a mistake in believing that the overwhelming majority of the people were, antithetical to progress, that they just want to fight. And so I think there are more people than we believe, but I felt really good, being able to sit down with Mike Flood and talk about housing, figure out ways. We spent a whole day, I turn back now and think about it, we spent one whole day, a real whole day, talking to people from across the country who had traveled to Washington or they were on Zoom, and as we began to try to fashion this legislation.
Well, Congressman Flood, does it have legs? Will leadership put it on the floor?
Actually, I feel like Emanuel and I have lucked out. We are running a committee right now that is at the apex of the political conversation on affordability. Not only does it have legs, it has the full support of the chairman and the ranking member. And so the bill that he and I put together came out of our committee 50-1. And the chairman of the committee, a Republican from Arkansas, and the ranking member, a Democrat from California, Maxine Waters, both signed off on it. And so the majority leader has told us it is going to the floor. The Senate has passed its bill called Road to Housing, and we've successfully been able to not take a vote on that so that we can have our ideas in there. And now the president is weighing in with all sorts of ideas. And so I think the work that we've done, and what I think is most interesting about this issue is that he and I each picked, out of 144 letters we got, we each picked 12 to come in and talk to us that day. So we talked to 24 different cities. And whether it was Huntsville, Alabama, Austin, Texas, San Diego, California, Kansas City, NeighborWorks, or the Habitat in Omaha, this was not a partisan issue. They all had concerns about the environmental reviews. They all had concerns about Davis-Bacon. They all had concerns about Section 3 requirements where you have to hire people that are indigent. And they all similarly shared issues with the Build America, Buy America. And it wasn't scripted. It was just a common theme. And so when we saw that, I knew we really had something we could work on together.
Let's turn our attention to what President Trump has said about housing, because he has put out several ideas. He wants to tackle the supply issue, the affordability issue. Here's the president in Davos talking about his action targeting Wall Street.
Wall Street giants and institutional investment firms, many of you are here, many of you are good friends of mine, many of you are supporters. Sorry to do this to you, I'm so sorry. But you've driven up housing prices by purchasing hundreds of thousands of single-family homes, and it's been a great investment for them. Often as much as 10% of houses on the market. But homes are built for people, not for corporations, and America will not become a nation of renters. We're not going to do that. That's why I have signed an executive order banning large institutional investors from buying single-family homes. It's just not fair to the public. They're not able to buy a house. And I'm calling on Congress to pass that ban into permanent law, and I think they will.
Congressman Cleaver calling on Congress to pass that ban into permanent law. Could it get Democratic votes?
I think so. When I first heard about the president's executive order, my first comment to the media that started calling me was, I was very pleased to hear the President of the United States say that he was interested in housing. I mean, that was a joyful moment. I think I don't want to overstate the corporate investment in housing, but I think most people dislike the thought of major corporations owning single-family housing at a time when, in my congressional district, the average house is all over $300,000, and people know that there's a great need.
Congressman Mike Flood, though, do you think that Republicans would get on board with restricting capitalism the way the president's talking about this?
Well, interestingly, Governor Abbott down in Texas and some state senators and representatives in Georgia, they've raised this issue, and I have no doubt that there are municipalities in this country that have had some bad actors in there. There are also really good players that bring capital in the market and address supply issues by having a home that somebody can rent. And so I think it's, we need to find the right balance. I think both Emanuel and I, if we had to prioritize anything that gets done, it's about getting first-time home buyers a home that they own. There's been a lot of work on multifamily. Now there's this effort with homes that are available for rent. Nothing says you're part of the community more than owning a home. You are part of the school district, the fabric, the city council, all of that stuff matters to you. And that's been the focus of our bill. And I have no doubt there will be some additions. But we have to remember we have a supply issue, and we do have some people in that lane that are still providing that. That said, I know the chairman of our committee, Mr. Hill, he is talking to the ranking member about how we navigate this and to see what is possible.
The president also talked about credit cards and tying it back to first-time home buyers. When he was in Davos, he doubled down on his desire to cap credit card interest rates. Here's what he had to say.
I'm asking Congress to cap credit card interest rates at 10% for 1 year. And this will help millions of Americans save for a home. They have no idea they're paying 28%. They go out there a little late in their payment and they end up losing their house. It's terrible.
The president at Davos, Congressman Flood, there's been pushback on this idea from Capitol Hill. We heard Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, saying this is not a good idea. Are lawmakers warming up to it?
Well, he's identified an issue, and that is consumer debt is crippling, and it's punishing, and it's suffocating. And we have a series of bills we call Make Community Banking Great Again. Community banks can play this role. Community banks can step in, and I'm looking at options where how can the federal government partner with our great community banks to help counsel these folks that have $30,000 in credit card debt and are paying 28%, restructure that debt, get a lower payment to get that immediate satisfaction, and then have a plan to pay it off. When I practiced law for a lot of years, I'd have people come into my office and they had unbelievable credit card debt. And by reaching out to the credit card companies, I could oftentimes get those numbers down in a significant way. And so there are things that we can do here. When it comes to the president, what I try to do is, what does he want to accomplish? He wants to accomplish easing the burden on people with a lot of consumer debt, unsecured consumer debt. The thing about the interest rates is that you shut off a lot of people from needed credit if they don't have access to that. And so we just have to navigate that, but the president's identified something that really matters here.
Congressman?
I agree. Look, I may not agree with President Trump on many things, but the fact that he brought this to the table, I think there will be some changes to what the president wants, but I think that he hit an issue that I think has aroused the American public to want to see something done. I mean, interest rates can be the difference between owning a home and wanting to own a home. And I think there are a lot of things that the president is saying about housing that I can embrace. Jamie Dimon was very strong in his opposition. I think we don't need to even exaggerate the fact that that is a problem, but I think we need to say openly that it's under 5% corporate participation in buying single-family homes, and I think it's a problem if it's only to a couple of 100,000 people across the country, and we need to address it.
What seems to be resonating with voters on housing is the affordability question. According to polls, affordability seems likely to be the major issue in the upcoming midterm campaign. A recent CNN poll found 64% of Americans think the president hasn't gone far enough in trying to reduce the price of everyday goods. And the Real Clear polling average indicates only 40.8% approve of the president's performance on the economy, and only 37.6% approve of his performance on inflation. Congressman Flood, is the president spending enough time on the issue of affordability when he is talking a lot about foreign policy and spending time overseas?
One of the things I said when I got on this committee is that Democrats have had a housing agenda for decades. Republicans have not been as engaged in the housing space as Democrats, to their credit. when I started on this committee before President Trump was ever the president, there wasn't a lot of talk about housing. President Trump has talked more about housing than any Republican president in 50 years, and he's right to do it. And before he got there, if you check my speeches out in 2023 and 2024, the price of a home built brand new in Columbus, Nebraska in 2019 was $250,000. Today, by the time you pay for everything plus the regulations plus you name it, it's $415,000. And if you got two folks working at a meatpacking plant, both making about $55,000 a year with overtime, they can't make it work. And that happened in 2023 and 2024. So the president's dealing with something that's been there for a while. He is focusing on housing. We are focusing on housing. And I think that's why we've been successful with the Democrats, because they have cared about this in such a meaningful way. We've been able to find common ground.
If I could just say, we're trying to make it easier for houses to be built. We have exemptions from federal demands, federal requirements, and we're trying to ease the burden and also at the same time attract those institutions that are committed to housing, the home builders associations around the country. There are, sometimes we overdo it with regulations, and Democrats, we've done that, but I think this is a clear attempt to make a correction.
Beyond housing, Congressman Cleaver, do Democrats have a clear message on affordability going into the midterms?
Well, I think that we have begun to craft this kind of a emphasis from the Democratic caucus. I think we are going to have to make some adjustments and changes. We're going to have a meeting in Virginia for the whole entire caucus to hone in on just that message you mentioned about affordability.
Sounds like there could be common ground, though, on the issue of housing, and we'll see what happens with your legislation and others. Let's turn our attention to immigration and ICE enforcement. The two of you are at odds over the administration's actions and the role of ICE. Congressman Cleaver, members of your party are calling for ICE to be abolished. Do you agree?
I'm not in the camp for just abolishing ICE. I do think that there is a need for us to reevaluate ICE, the problems we're seeing in Minneapolis, the problems we've seen in Los Angeles, problems we've seen here in Washington, D.C. Can't be ignored. That I think some of the problems were created because the ICE agents, in my estimation, were not trained as our police officers. I mean, they only have 47 days of training. With a police officer, you go almost a year. So I think we've got to re-examine ICE and maybe even restructure it sometime in the future.
Is it smart politics to call for ICE to be abolished?
It may be for some. Sometimes I just do it on the basis of what I believe, and on this case, I think we need. First and foremost, we need comprehensive immigration, which would make the work of ICE much easier, and we've got to do that. Because we don't, we're going to do enormous damage to the United States and its image across the world.
Well, as you know, for decades, members of Congress have called for comprehensive immigration reform, and it seems very difficult to agree on across party lines. However, Congressman Flood, when you listen to Congressman Cleaver talk about training for ICE agents, laws that pertain to how ICE does its work, do you think there's common ground there?
Well, I don't think anybody in Congress would be against additional training for anyone in law enforcement when the public wants to see more. Here's what I will say, and this is not my friend here across the table today, but earlier today, or this week I should say, at a hearing, you had members of his party calling these law enforcement officers fascists or Nazis. And one thing I've noticed that's happened, and I'm one of the few Republicans that does a lot of town halls, is that people don't come to the town hall to engage you on an issue. They're there to perform on video. They want to be taken to the ground and handcuffed. They want to be ushered out. They want that moment on camera that shows them in some kind of a battle with authority to make this statement about how effective they are at changing the hearts and minds of Americans. And when ICE enforced in Omaha, I saw people doing the same thing. They were jumping in front of cars that had agents in them and prohibiting them from driving on or putting their bodies in front of that performance stuff. And I'm not saying it's just on one side. I'm sure it's all over America for a lot of different reasons. That is dangerous. And we have to respect the law enough to recognize that they are carrying out the laws that we collectively had written. And, I heard Tom Homan say the other day, if they would let us into the jails in Minnesota, we wouldn't be enforcing this way. Come on, let's figure out a way through this.
Let's turn our attention to Greenland. Fascinating twists and turns over the last 48 hours in geopolitics. President Trump at the World Economic Forum backing off his desire to acquire Greenland. After meeting with the head of NATO at the World Economic Forum, the president on Truth Social posted this: "We have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland." The president later discussed what it means for the status of Greenland going forward.
We will have everything we want. We're getting everything we want at no cost.
So the Golden Dome will be on Greenland?
A piece of it, yes, and it's a very important part because everything comes over Greenland. If the bad guys start shooting, it comes over Greenland.
So what are we talking about? An acquisition of Greenland? Are you going to pay for it?
We're talking about it's really being negotiated now, the details of it, but essentially it's total access. There's no end. There's no time limit.
Congressman Flood, you are on the Congressional Greenland Caucus. Your reaction to what you heard from the president, what he says about this framework of a deal?
I am delighted. I am delighted. I will tell you, over the weekend, you're watching the news. The last thing I want to ever see is us in an armed conflict with a NATO ally. But I remind myself all the time that the president's approach to problems is always unconventional. It's always unconventional. And you have to sift through it long enough to see how it comes out. And it gets better as fast as it gets bad. And, this is great for America. When I had the Danish ambassador in my office, they couldn't be nicer. And they said, we've never said no to America. We love Americans. We want to be part of, the joint security efforts in NATO. And I just never thought it was going to get there. I actually thought this would be Marco Rubio's doing, but the president did it himself. And he's going to do things the right way. When the dust settles on his presidency, and I know it is a lot to absorb every single day for all of us. When the dust settles, you're going to see him having fixed a lot of long-term systemic problems our country's faced. I'm not going to say you're always going to like how he got to the result, but I think we're going to look back in history and be like, this guy changed America for the better.
Are you concerned at all, though, how he started out the week in Davos and critics saying that he has alienated our NATO allies?
The president has a very unique style, and he has shown, look at how the Middle East has changed. Look at Israel's position. Where's Hamas today? Where's Hezbollah? What's the status of Iran? Where are we at with Venezuela? The proof is in the pudding. His work has brought more peace on this earth, and he is doing what I think he needs to do to protect our eastern seaboard and address the Golden Dome. Is it bumpy? Is it rocky? Yes, sometimes it is. But he's also got one of the best secretaries of state that our country has seen in a long time. And I will tell you, Marco Rubio, he has the affection of every single member of the Republican conference in the House of Representatives. We think very, very, very highly of him.
Congressman Cleaver, your initial reaction to what you're hearing about this framework of a deal? We will probably learn more details, but just your initial reaction.
Well, I hate the front part of what the president did, which was to attack our allies. I think in calling the names of some of the leaders in Europe in a very derogatory way, I think our friends are now wondering how friendly we are going to be in the future, China has now entered into a trade arrangement with Canada. Canada has redesigned its relationship with the United States to include more trade with China. I'm concerned about that. I've been to England. I've been to Greenland. I've been to the base. We had one base. We used to have 11 more. I think we have to appreciate and respect the desires of the Danish people. They don't want to be a state in the United States. They want their own independence. It takes a unique kind of a human being to live in that environment and then love it, and which many of us couldn't make it. I mean, I have to admit, after going to Greenland, I thought, I want to go home to Missouri, and they're walking around outside like it's springtime.
Yeah.
You didn't enjoy the ice.
Did not enjoy the ice, and I did. When I was there, it was the period when it's daytime, 24 hours.
Oh my God!
And I had a struggle every night or day or whenever I was there.
All right, well, let's turn to domestic issues. A bit of a shocker on Capitol Hill after a number of Democrats voted with Republicans to hold former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in contempt of Congress after failing to appear for depositions related to the panel's investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. This will now go to the House floor. Congressman Cleaver, will you vote for it in favor of holding them in contempt of Congress?
I'm not sure. Right now I'd say no, but I don't hide the fact that, as a lot of people would know anyway, in my party, I'm closer to the Clintons probably than I have been to any. Not probably. I'm closer to the Clintons than I have been with any president, and they've taken a pounding almost since day one. Some of it the president Clinton may have deserved, but I'm not sure that we ought to be doing, bringing them in when there are some people we absolutely 100% know to have been involved who are not being brought in.
Do your Democratic colleagues that voted with Republicans, one was cited as saying, look, I know Bill Clinton has information that we could use in our investigation looking into Jeffrey Epstein. Do you disagree with your colleague?
I don't. I don't disagree. I think, the president at first agreed to this, and I think listening to some of the talk after that by members of Congress, the president made a decision that he and Mrs. Clinton, didn't want to do it. I mean, there are people with there are people with information that we know they have, and they haven't been called.
Congressman Flood, your reaction to the contempt of Congress?
Well, I think when the Congress voted by a vote of 427, essentially to release the Epstein files, that was a signal to the American people that, Americans, and by and through their representatives, want us to get to the bottom of this. That's what this concerns. I hate the idea of this happening to a former president. I mean, it doesn't matter what party you are. But if we are going to assert our Article I authority and we are conducting an investigation into the Epstein files, and like my friend said here, he had maybe originally agreed to come. Listen, he's not getting called in to testify for anything other than to give honest answers to what he saw or what he knows. And simply come in and do that. And if for some reason there's something he doesn't want to talk about, he can claim the fifth. He can avail himself of the same rights every other American has. So one of the things that people forget in Washington, and it shocks me sometimes, is every action has a reaction. And now that we're in the business of enforcing congressional subpoenas, this is what happens. And I would hope that cooler heads would prevail and they can avoid doing this contempt action, but that's not my lane.
We've covered a lot of ground, gentlemen. Thank you both for coming to the ceasefire table.
Yeah, thank you both. Thanks for having me.
Nebraska Republican Congressman Mike Flood and Missouri Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, thank you both.
Good to be with you.
Have a good weekend.
All right, let's turn now to this week's C-SPAN Flashback, where we dig into our video archives to highlight a moment from political history that feels especially relevant today. 26 years ago, Bill Clinton became the first U.S. president to address the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. At the turn of the century, President Clinton spoke about moving away from isolationism and the importance of bringing countries together in an increasingly connected world. Here's a portion of that speech.
Those who wish to roll back the forces of globalization because they fear its disruptive consequences, I believe, are plainly wrong. 50 years of experience shows that greater economic integration and political cooperation are positive forces. Those who believe globalization is only about market economics, however, are wrong too. All these new networks must lead to new arrangements that work for all, that work to spur growth, lift lives, raise standards, both around the world and within nations. Now, leaders from business, government, and civil society, therefore, must come together to build a future that can unite, not divide us.
After President Clinton, no U.S. president addressed the forum again until President Trump did so in 2018. To break down President Trump's 2026 appearance in Davos and dive into other political stories, we're joined now by two strategists from opposite sides of the aisle. Democratic strategist Ty Matsdorf, a former director of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and Republican strategist Alex Conant, former senior advisor for then Republican Senator Marco Rubio. I will look to the two of you to pull back the curtain on the news of this week as strategists, not surrogates. Your initial reaction to hearing Bill Clinton all those years ago saying, let's move away from isolationism.
Absolutely. I think that what Bill Clinton recognized is we live in an interconnected world. But I think the second part of what he said was actually just as important, that it can't be all about market capitalization. Because I think that what you've seen economically here at home is driving a lot of what President Trump, a lot of what Democrats are pushing forward on the economic impacts of globalization. So I think that there is a little bit of both sides of the coin.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think he reflected the bipartisan conventional wisdom for the last 30 years, which was trade is a positive thing, immigration is good for the United States, and the more alliances we have overseas, the stronger the country will be. And then Trump, of course, came around in 2016 and said that's all wrong, and really challenged that status quo in a way that I think the establishment is still trying to kind of grasp with how best to respond to his attacks on it. And I think it's ironic that, of course, that Trump loves going to Davos. He loves mixing it up with the CEOs. But I think he likes it in part because he likes going there and telling them they're all wrong, and everything that they believe in, trade and immigration, are things that he thinks are actually undermining America and that he's working against.
And this week's trip was no different. It's been a whirlwind in geopolitics. With world leaders at the World Economic Forum. We'll start with President Trump's message to NATO allies.
What we have gotten out of NATO is nothing except to protect Europe from the Soviet Union and now Russia. I mean, we've helped them for so many years. We've never gotten anything, except we pay for NATO. And we paid for many years until I came along. We paid for, in my opinion, 100% of NATO because they weren't paying their bills. All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built.
Alex, this was before a deal was announced with the NATO chief. When it comes to messaging, who's the president's audience here?
It's a good question. I mean, look, he always talks to his base. I think he's always thinking about what do Fox News viewers back home want to hear, what's going to get the crowds excited at my rallies. I think that's always top of mind for him. But then after that, I think a lot of that messaging was to the Europeans and trying to signal that to them that he's ready to negotiate on Greenland, but there's going to be a negotiation on Greenland. And it's classic Trump, which is take the maximalist approach, scare people, force people to negotiate, and then settle. And that's what he did in real estate. That's what we've seen him do over and over again in the tariff wars earlier this year, and again now over the Greenland issue. So I think a lot of the times the markets and others take everything he says very literally. And I think after 10 years, we should all recognize that we need to take everything he says with a giant grain of salt, recognizing that many of the times he is trying to negotiate. He's willing to settle for much less than he actually asks, than he's demanding. And we'll see what the details and how this Greenland stuff pans out over the next coming weeks and months. But so far, he seems to have gotten at least some of what he wanted by simply using this over-the-top rhetoric.
Ty, it's interesting, though, how you saw other world leaders pivoting at the World Economic Forum this week. Take a look at the headline on the Prime Minister of Canada's remarks. Carney's blunt message to Davos: the rules-based order is dead.
I think a couple things that I want to reference. One, I think that I would disagree with President Trump that we haven't gotten anything out of NATO over the last 40 years. I think if you look at the history of what generated NATO, your C-SPAN audience will appreciate this. I just got done reading a great biography of John McCloy, and when you read about him, you understand sort of what NATO did get. But I think I want to pick up on what Alex said about President Trump's negotiating style. In real estate, in dealing with Congress, the media, you can be a little bit more maximalist. I think what we're seeing here is you have elected leaders who have their own politics back at home, have their own countries back at home, and whether it be Mark Carney or the Danes, they are going to then push back. And two things can be true. You absolutely can make a case of the national security importance of Greenland. Absolutely. You can also say the way that he has gone about this has probably made the ultimate objective actually a little bit harder to achieve. And so I think that what you're seeing, Mark Carney, who I have great fondness for, I think he did sort of lay out that us mid-sized countries are now going to push back and say, if you guys aren't going to follow the rules, if you're not going to act as we have over the last 40 years, we have to look out for ourselves.
A similar direction from Mr. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. Here's a headline from his remarks at the World Economic Forum. Zelensky accuses Europe of avoiding action on Ukraine after meeting Trump in Davos. He had some pretty strong rhetoric for European allies.
Yeah, well, Zelensky always wants more, and who can blame him, right? Like, if I was being invaded by the Russian army, I'd be asking for as much as possible to help defend myself as well. But yeah, I think I agree with your point. I think Trump would say to these smaller countries, not small countries, but the Danes and the Europeans and the Canadians are saying, well, we need to do more to take care of ourselves. He said, yep. I mean, I think that's the point. I think he's been wanting them to spend more money on defense to the folks to Mexico and countries in Central America to do more on immigration. I think that the Trump position is very much that the rest of the world has taken advantage of America. I don't necessarily agree with that perspective, but that is their worldview. And so when they hear, I think, Carney and others saying, well, the rest of the world has to step up and do more if we can't count on America, I think that's kind of the point.
Some Democratic governors were also on hand at the World Economic Forum looking to combat President Trump's messaging. California Governor Gavin Newsom, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear are names often discussed in future White House hopefuls, as future White House hopefuls. Here's Newsom telling world leaders to grow a backbone when it comes to President Trump.
I can't take this complicity. People rolling over. I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. I mean, handing out crowns and this is pathetic. Nobel Prizes that are being given away. I mean, it's just pathetic. And I hope people understand how pathetic they look on the world stage. I mean, at least from an American perspective, it's embarrassing.
Gavin Newsom is also here, and when he got here, he was really critical of the other European leaders. He didn't name them, but he said that he believes they basically capitulated to President Trump. Is that how you see it as another prominent governor in the United States?
I don't think that's what we need. We already have a president attacking these European leaders, leaving them with little choice but to find other options other than the United States. My message here is America is more than just the president. The American people believe in our relationship with Canada. The American people believe in our relationship with Europe.
Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear responding to Gavin Newsom's comments about European leaders. Ty, should we read into these 2028 hopefuls going to the World Economic Forum?
Yes, in the sense of I think that they're looking for opportunities to make the case of what they think America should be. And, you know, obviously it's a world stage and you want to start to get your name known. I think that, you know, it's no secret that we're going to have an open, wide open primary for the Democratic nomination in 2028. I think there's a lot of candidates that have their eyes towards it. And one thing, good, bad, or indifferent, you can say about Donald Trump is he blots out the media sun. And so if you want to be seen, you have to sort of be reacting to his orbit, at least at this moment. And I think you saw those comments, and you know, that's much about personality. Governor Newsom has been very combative. Governor Bashir more bringing together. So it's probably more about their personality. But as far as taking the moment and advantage of the moment, I think that is something that Democrats are always, it's a push-pull, but always having to combat or having to deal with that reality.
Alex, when you look at those two styles, what do you think is the best one to respond to President Trump?
Well, it's not my job to give advice to Democrats. I will say I've worked on a lot of presidential campaigns, and going back to 2008, 2004, most recently Marco Rubio's campaign in 2016 where we lost to Trump. And look, to be a successful presidential candidate in today's day and age, you have to be a star. You have to have star qualities that make people want to tune in. When they're scrolling on TikTok or Instagram and they see you talking, they stop and they like it or they share it because they either like it or they think it's provocative or interesting. I am not convinced that any Democrat that's being mentioned, these governors, have the star power that it takes to compete in modern presidential politics. And I think they all went to Davos, not because they want to meet CEOs or world leaders, but because there's more media in Davos this week than anywhere else in the world. And they're desperate for attention. But they have to go to the media to get that coverage. The media is not going to Sacramento, is not going to Kentucky to cover them, because I'm not convinced that they have that star power. But, you know, that's what presidential campaigns are there to prove.
What about their social media platforms?
And Governor Newsom, I'll give him credit, has shown some adeptness with that, and with his podcast, which I think is intentionally provocative, but as a result has broken through a little bit. And I think, you know, you're seeing his tactics on social media, whether they're effective or not, they certainly get noticed, and he has a lot of followers, which is super important. Like, if you cannot engage people on social media, you cannot be a successful presidential candidate or candidate for anything in 2026, 2028, and beyond.
Just to play off that, I think that what's going to be interesting in 2028, when Donald Trump theoretically finally exits stage left, does any candidate have that star power? Are they going to go, is the media going to flock to Little Rock for Governor Sanders, or will Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, will she get that? So I think that that's one thing. Then just one point on Governor Newsom. I think that the social media is important, but Democratic primary voters particularly want to see action. And I think what really launched Governor Newsom into the stratosphere that he finds himself now was his redistricting battle. And I think that is what really brought a lot of attention to him.
Before we get to 2028, though, we do have the midterms coming up. President Trump marked 1 year in office of his second term, and he continues to struggle in the polling. The Real Clear polling average has him at just over 42% approval rating. Take a look at his disapproval rating, 55.6%. When it comes to the economy, 40.8% approve, 56.1% disapprove, and on inflation, 37.6% approving, while 60.6% disapprove of his handling of inflation. Should the White House be worrying about these numbers, Alex?
Look, the most static thing in American politics is Trump's approval rating. I mean, you can show that number is 42%. It's been 42% for 10 years. You know, it might move a point or two, but through COVID and assassination attempts, Venezuela, I mean, everything that we lived through over the last year or two, it doesn't move. I mean, and people have made up their minds about Donald Trump. Now, I think the underlying numbers about the economy and inflation and other issues is concerning. I don't know it's so much to the White House, but certainly to Republicans more broadly, because Donald Trump's not going to be on the ballot ever again, including in the midterm elections in 2026. And so what are you going to get voters to turn out for Republicans if they don't like the handling on the economy, they don't like the handling of inflation and immigration? These are the issues that are going to be top of mind when voters are entering the ballot box. And if they don't like the way the president's handling it, they're probably not going to like the way the Republican candidates are handling it either, which will clearly be a drag on candidates up and down the board. So I think that's why you're seeing the White House trying so desperately hard to pivot to issues like affordability and inflation. His speech in Davos, we showed some clips, it was supposed to be about affordability. I mean, he rolled out a couple of affordability initiatives, some of which didn't go over so well with Republicans, ironically, but nonetheless, like you can tell the White House is trying, their heart's in the right spot. But then when he talks about Greenland and starting a trade war with our European allies and the stock market tanks earlier this week, clearly that is what's going to dominate people's the media coverage and what people are talking about. And so it's hard to break through with these like little policy things when you're threatening World War III.
Ty, on affordability, do Democrats see an opening here?
Oh, absolutely. Look, you showed those numbers. There was a New York Times poll this week that came out that showed with independents, because we know people can go their partisan corners, Trump is 30% or 30 points underwater on the economy, 27% underwater on cost of living. That is some big warning signs for Leader Thune and Spear Johnson. But Democrats have to have an alternative. We have to give a proactive vision. I think that we being Democrats did a great job in the shutdown of highlighting affordability issues. Shutdowns, I'm always a little wary of them, but anchoring it around affordability, around healthcare affordability, was the right thing to do. But I think that what you're probably going to see in the next coming months is, okay, if you give Democrats the keys back to power, this is what they're going to do to make your life better, more affordable.
Let's listen to President Trump this week in the briefing room and what he had to say about the economy and the bad PR.
We inherited a mess. The numbers that we inherited were way up, and now we brought them, almost all of them, way down. We brought them way down. I mean, I'm not getting, maybe I have the bad public relations people, but we're not getting it across. We inherited high numbers, and we brought them way down.
Alex, is it the messaging?
I mean, as a PR guy, I always just flinch when I see the principals attacking the comms shop
in the briefing room.
In the briefing room for not doing a good enough job. When I always argue, well, look, you have to have something to communicate. And look, he's right. Inflation numbers are way down from where they were a year ago. GDP growth in the third and fourth quarter last year were incredible. Stock market's doing incredibly well. There's a lot of wealth being generated in the country. People are certainly, on paper, doing better than they were a year ago. I don't think there's any arguing that. They don't feel it. And I think part of it is inflation. Inflation, people don't forget it. They still remember when everything they paid for was a lot cheaper 2 years ago. And so, and Trump said he was going to bring down prices, have deflation, which I don't think any economist would actually recommend. But clearly we haven't had real deflation other in a couple of sectors like say maybe gas prices. So I think there's, I think they have a policy problem. They also have a political problem, which is like people remember when things were cheaper. If I were in the White House right now, what I would tell myself as I was going to bed every night is, look, the election is not tomorrow. The election's in 10 months. People's memories fade. 10 months from now, they will forget how much cheaper things were in 2021 and 2022. And they'll remember that, yes, inflation, assuming it remains low, prices have been stable for 2 years now. And if we can get interest rates down on top of that, which the Fed is indicating is going to happen, I think people will feel a lot better about the economy come Election Day.
Ty, do Democrats have a unified message?
Yes, they do.
Who's the messenger?
Well, that's a different question, which I want to get to in a moment. What we have a unified message at the moment in reaction to President Trump. What we need to coalesce around is what is the message that we're going to put on the proactive thing. And anytime you're out of power, it's hard to have a single unified messenger. I think we've got great leadership that sort of put us in good positions. But I agree with Alex. My friend who, when we were in the White House, she was in the comm shop. She had a mug that said NACP, not a comms problem. I took my family to a really nice dinner.
I need to get that mug.
Yeah, it's a great mug. And in meetings, she would just like hold it up and point to it. But look, I took my family to a really nice dinner at Red Lobster a couple nights, and it was more than $100. Like that's what Americans are feeling. So, and the hard part that Biden dealt with, anytime you deal with inflation, you're dealing with people's feelings and emotions. And that is oftentimes a hard thing to combat.
And Alex, the president is the face of the Republican Party. Are candidates weighing whether or not they have a come to their states, to their districts, to campaign with him ahead of the midterms?
Well, if you're in a Republican primary, you want Donald Trump there, and you've seen there's a couple senators whose careers are now either over on life support in North Carolina, Texas, Louisiana, simply because Trump didn't endorse them. So I think in a primary, you absolutely want him. In the general election, that's a tougher question. I was the press guy for all of the battleground states in the Bush White House in 2006. I don't know if you guys remember, or your viewers remember how that election went, but it was not good. And this is in the middle of the Iraq War and Bush's, and right after Katrina, Republicans got completely clobbered. And I took the job thinking, well, I'm going to travel around the country with Bush and campaign for all these candidates, and I think we did one trip. And so, I think we'll see what Trump's poll numbers are like this fall. I'm sure there'll be candidates in red states that would love to campaign with him. But whether or not he's campaigning in Minnesota, Wisconsin, some of the swing states, we'll see.
Ty, how could Democrats screw this up ahead of the midterm?
You could screw it up by putting forth a vision that the American people think is going to be a little out of the mainstream when you do get back to power. On an individual level, you could nominate candidates that are outside the mainstream of their district. You could there's a lot of ways you could mess up, and by messing it up, you could still win the majority for sure, but maybe you don't drive as deep into the map. And then the other thing is, how do you set yourself up for 2028? Because if you look back at like 2006, 2018, those then became launching points for what the presidential campaigns were built on. And for viewers that are tracking home, because I know C-SPAN does this, the number one indicator of if you're going to be the Democratic nominee, or a leading indicator if you're going to be the Democratic presidential nominee, are you the most requested surrogate in battlegrounds the cycle before? So when you start to see, whether it be Gavin Newsom or Andy Beshear out in battleground districts, what they're laying forward, that is, I think, what the vision will be going for 2028.
What's your prediction about what happens with Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate? Do you think they stay on?
When we take back the majority? Absolutely. Like, here's the thing about leadership. I think, and obviously, I think that they stay on. Yeah, and particularly if we have a good midterm. If we have a good midterm, absolutely.
It's time now for our weekly feature, Not on My Bingo Card, where we highlight a funny, unusual, or downright weird political or cultural moment. Recently, we became aware of an unexpected friendship when former Speaker Nancy Pelosi shared her condolences to the family of her friend, Grateful Dead guitarist Bob Weir, who died this month at the age of 78. Pelosi was one of the thousands that gathered in San Francisco recently to celebrate Bob Weir's life. The former speaker sang along as John Mayer played the Grateful Dead classic Ripple. She also shared some moments of her friendship with Weir.
Bobby really loved democracy. He loved our country. And you know what he wanted everybody to do? Vote. As we know, listening to you, Bobby, the music will never stop, the love will not fade, and the light you brought into this world will continue to guide us. Like a familiar melody we carry with us wherever we go. May you rest in peace, dear Bob, and may we honor your life by listening to each other a little more closely, to the music, to one another, and to the moment we are blessed to share. God bless you, Bobby Weir. Thank you all for being here.
I continue to be surprised on who are Grateful Dead fans. Who are the Deadheads? You've got people like Jerome Powell, conservative Ann Coulter, who are Grateful Dead fans.
Yeah.
What do you guys make of this?
I think we got a lot of boomers left in politics. And one of the we talk about 2028. I think we'll see generational change, and maybe we'll get some folks that really like alt rock in the White House.
All right. Grateful Dead seems to be bipartisan.
Absolutely. The Dead is timeless. The Dead is like my little kids love the Grateful Dead. So the Dead will continue on. Bob Weir was a great individual during the inauguration in 2008. He was very good to me, better than he needed to be. So I think that the Dead is is a symbol of America, and I'm very happy that former Leader Pelosi said that.
That's all the time we have. Republican strategist Alex Conant and Democratic strategist Ty Matsdorf, thank you both for joining me. And let's close this week's program with our ceasefire moment of the week, highlighting what's possible when politicians come together as Americans, not just partisans. This month, top ag lawmakers from both the House and the Senate spoke to American Farm Bureau Federation members about farm labor reform. Arkansas Republican Senator John Bozeman and Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar spoke about the bipartisan work it takes to get new legislation passed. Take a listen.
That I'd very much like to do, and working with Senator Klobuchar, who's truly a great partner and a good friend, is we've got to figure out a path forward. We've got to get ourselves in a situation. Congress is stepping in and being helpful. I think they're going to continue to do that, but we can't depend on it. We've got to get ourselves in a situation where agriculture is sustainable.
Some of this is getting some of the members, congressional members, legislators, governors, out and inviting them and not letting politics get in the way, right? There are things so much bigger than what divides us right now, right? And courage and getting things done is about standing with people you don't always agree with for the betterment of your country and the betterment of rural areas right now.
Lawmakers finding common ground, the type of moments we love to showcase here. That's all the time we have for this episode. Joining us next time on Ceasefire will be San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria and Oklahoma City Mayor David Holt. Ceasefire is also available as a podcast. Find us in all the usual places. I'm Greta Bronner, and remember, whether or not you agree, keep talking and keep listening.